me a fire, baby, let me dance to your love. I wanna feel your fire burn, rising from the flames. Baptize on me to burn again. Let me dance in the rhythm of your flame. If I burn, let me die to burn again. If I burn, let me die to burn again.
Hello, and welcome to Get Lit.
Hi, welcome to the show.
Well, we usually like to address, what is going on amongst our social network and peer group and the world. And where I'd like to go is it's becoming more and more prominent. I know we already did a show on the Whistleblower Kids, but there's another aspect of that topic that I'd like to bring forward. And when we ask, well, what can we do? How do we do this? One of the things that I'm observing is if we as adults are still going through the emotional challenge of even using the vocabulary that's coming out in the news, to be able to even say the word cult or Satanism or blood sacrifice. What's happening is if the difficulty is still here with the adults, the concern that I'd like to speak to today is, what about the children? What about the youths? And part of what I feel could be of assistance is, I had mentioned this on one of the shows recently, that perhaps adults, maybe we could start role-playing. And in fact, that's something that you and I could even play out. Role-playing, adult having a conversation with their child.
Let's back up a second, because you're if people haven't seen the other shows or watched anything else on CCN, they're not going to know anything of what you're speaking to. So, what Blue is speaking to is a disclosure that happened probably, like a month ago now, 3 weeks ago, of these, they're called the Whistleblower Kids, and it's a small city in England where these children came forward and disclosed the whole town was basically a cult that were sacrificing children and acting out sexually with the children, and that the government was involved, teachers, bureaucracy, the police force, and the children basically are being kept in social services still because of this. So what's wound up happening is that there's lots of platforms where people are speaking to this shift in spirituality and integrity, and this idea of disclosure, and how we're able through technology and just the shift in our energetics as a planet to be able to come to this place where we're disclosing a lot more things that we never were able to disclose before. And there's a real bravery to that. But now we've hit on this mark of the Whistleblower Kids, where it's taken, as we've spoken to in the Whistleblower episode that we did, or broadcast that we did 3 back from this one, where this is really the apex. This is the nut of all of it. It speaks to disclosure on every single level, from how we're manipulating sexually our children and growing into adults like that. The bureaucracies are involved, the money, social services, how we're prostituting out the well-being of generations for governmental monetization. And so it's really hit home with a lot of people that are really brave in broadcasting and doing these things, but it's touched a chord in ways where there's been, and we follow these things, we look at the tone of what's happening, and it's really struck a chord of fear, where a lot of people want to speak to this, but we don't know how to. And these are people that speak to everything, and then it gets this where it's like, speak, disclose, be brave, be brave. Oh.
Pedophilia.
Oh my God.
Oh my gosh.
How do we speak to the whistleblowers? So that's the background on this one. And so, we've been speaking to this idea of, okay, we've hit this nugget, and a lot of people that speak to these things so bravely got to this point and just are terrified. These brave people are even terrified. So how do you think the children feel? How do you think just the mass populace feels that can't even speak to the other parts of disclosure before we even get to this? So we've been speaking around that, Blue and I, and we want to address those pieces in there.
Nice, thanks. That was really necessary. So, and we did, during our show about this topic, we did address that part of the healing and empowerment is that we just look and reflect upon our own issues, our own emotional reactions that we're having, and that there is a necessary clearing and calming of that before we can actually stay in a neutral position with enough spaciousness to really look at the facts and understand how do we proceed from here. And so
the 3Ds, what were the 3Ds?
It was discover, disclose, and
it was disclose, discern, discover.
Yeah. And
how do we do that with all this intense information? Even people who have really built their muscle, their moxie around scary things to disclose and fact-finding.
Exactly.
This one's really stopping people up.
And one of the interviews I had done with Karen Lambie, she is coming from an educational perspective. She's doing preventative tools for sex trafficking, and she's going into schools, speaking to children and adults on what to be watchful of, what to be alerted about. And so I kind of went back.
Because, we think of this, I'm sorry, but I want to throw this in there. We think of sex trafficking and pedophilia on a mass level, this, cult, these whole towns doing this, is something that's away from ourselves. But Karen Lambie actually brought to the surface, and this isn't, this is actually fact-based stuff, that sex trafficking is no longer just happening in, poor countries that are recovering from war for many years. It's happening right here in our very homes, in this very state. I mean, sex trafficking has become the largest money-making illegal industry in the world, behind drugs, behind regular prostitution, or in front of. And now people are catching on as, this is something we can make money. Why are we even, having the Serbian mafia do it? Mm-hmm. It's happening right here with people and their own children and families.
Exactly. And so what I was really appreciative of is Karen was pointing out the signs, and I'll put that link of the interview I did with her.
So can you tell me what a couple of the signs were, just off the top of your head?
She used some examples where the child was coming home and was starting to slip into depression, and was staying away from interaction with the family. And she was being threatened, so she couldn't reveal what was going on. And then, of course, the grades in school drop. Their attention span
That's
drops.
pretty typical, even for just regular, minimal, like more subtle sexual disempowerment.
And so what, looking at it from that perspective, that's what helped me spiral back to, okay, let's think about this a little further. Because granted, someone can go into the schools and educate the children and the adults, but let's come home for a moment to those of us who are parents and guardians of children, knowing that this is prevailing in the entire world. It came back to basics. What is the vocabulary that we can use in this day and age to communicate with our children in a way that we do not instill fear, but we raise their consciousness and awareness to some of these very important things that can be harmful.
Can I back up a sec?
Yeah, back up.
Because I'm really curious too about what language are we using, just us as parents and caregivers, teachers, whatever it may be. What language are we using that we're unaware that we're using that propagates some of this dis-ease and dysfunction I'm curious about that piece. Like maybe we can do some discovery around that, because language is such a powerful thing. That matrix is so powerful.
Right.
And we're not even knowing it because, we've also spoken to becoming desensitized and falling into just the paradigm and the norm. And so I'm curious about that piece. Like, what language are we using that we might think is innocent, but it's really actually conditioning and manipulative? And then what language could we use to speak to our children in a way to get them deprogrammed and then reprogrammed in a way that it's not traumatizing, that makes them aware of their autonomy and their empowerment?
Okay, well, let's even back up. Before we even had the topic of pedophilia and sex trafficking in our own vocabulary.
Right.
Let's talk about sexuality. To this day, parents are still calling the penis a willy or the vagina a private. And right there...
Not my daughter, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. But most people. And we have to stop right there and go, okay, is it time to really clean up that vocabulary?
I have a funny story about that, actually.
Okay.
That speaks really to this in terms of how, as a society, we are so nervous around that language. And so Lily was probably about 4, and we went to the grocery store, and she was in the cart, and we were in line at the end, and she wanted to crawl out of the cart, and she was crawling out, and she fell on her crotch, and it hurt. It fell right on the rim, and she goes, "Ow, Mommy, my vagina!" And it was like this slow motion thing that happened, and it was like I had this whole, there was this big, really tough black guy behind me, totally gangbanged out, and I mean, it was like his mama had just slapped him, and he was like, and I could see him in slow motion be like, "My God." He like, his face looked like he was like a little 9-year-old, like someone said vagina. And then, everybody in the store turned, right? And the whole thing happened in slow motion for me because it was loud. "Ow, Mommy, my vagina." Oh my. And everybody turned and looked at her, and she kind of looked at everybody. And why is everybody staring at me? And I had this whole image of like, my little bird being swooped away by social services, and the police are carrying me out, my toes are dragging on the floor, and I'm like, no, there's nothing wrong with the word vagina. It's just fine, and I had this whole image in slow motion come through my head, and then I just looked at her, and she looked at me, because she knew everybody was staring at her in the line in the grocery store. And she said, "Mommy, did I say something wrong?" And I said, "No, sweetie, I think you were just a little loud, and it drew attention." And that was
okay, but
that
in essence, you know what you're describing?
Well,
she was a whistleblower.
Right.
She was a whistleblower.
I mean, she just said the word vagina in public, like big deal.
On the language.
Right. And so we get in the car, and she looked at me, and she said, "Mommy, was it not okay for me to say vagina like that?" And I said, "Well, Lily, it's one of those words that can make people nervous." And she said, "Well, why? Why does it make people nervous? Is something wrong with it?" And I said, "No, sweetie, there's nothing wrong with it, but you get to a certain age, and your vagina is your private place." And so we treat that, and I reframed it where we treat it with a lot of respect, and we honor it. So it's not one of those words we throw out in the grocery store. She said, "Well, who can I say it to then?" I said, "Well, you can say it to me, you can say it to your grandma, you can say it to our family members, you can say it to the doctor, but it's a really special word that so I reframed it for her, but there was a complete shift in her where she felt like she had said something wrong. And I was like, dude, there's nothing and what I wanted to say to her was, you go outside and you shout vagina wherever you want, girl. I mean, don't show it, but shout it, I'm like, be proud, be loud. And yet I was saying to her, like, dude, it's not okay. Vaginas aren't okay. And you can't say that. And penises aren't okay either, That story speaks to that idea.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
Our vocabulary, we really have to address that, or you're put in situations. I mean, I'm sure there's many parents out there.
And then we were at the park one day, and Lily went down the slide and hurt her vagina. My daughter's like sewing her vagina. It's crazy. And she goes, "Oh, Mommy, I hurt my vagina." And I was there with like all these moms that are like, lactation specialists and went to Smith for college and, majored in feminist studies. And And she came down the slide, and we're all there with our kids, and and she goes, "Ow, my vagina, Mommy, I think I hurt my vagina." And all the mothers just stopped and froze and looked at me and looked back at her. And they go, "Did she just say vagina?" And I said, "Yeah, what do you call it?" And all in unison, they go, "Well, we don't call it a vagina." And I was like, what is wrong with you people? You are like feminist scholars that are well educated, that breastfed your child and squatted on the floor and gave birth with everybody watching, and you can't say the word vagina. And I was like, dudes, you guys, go grab a coffee and figure it out and come back and So,
Okay.
yeah.
And I do want to share with the viewers is that Rebecca's about to do a performance, and you've probably heard of it, is the theme of the Vagina Monologues.
Right, it's the show
And
Vagina Monologues.
you did a piece about, 8-9 years
so
ago.
we're remounting, yes, I said mounting. Tee-hee. We're remounting the show again after a decade. And the big joke is we're all wearing reading glasses now. But yeah, so we're remounting the show again for a huge fundraiser for the Red Tent. And the last time we did the show, it sold out our 1,000-seat theater. And people came from the 4-state area for it. And I did the piece about the Bosnian rape war crimes. And I'm doing that piece again. And I actually have 40 feet of fabric that I wrap myself in and unwrap and hang over the lip of the stage. It's really, I'm so glad to be able to, honored to do it again. But yeah, so we're doing the show again in a week and a half.
Well,
Saturday
the reason,
the 20th.
Yeah, and the reason I brought that up is that prior to beginning the show, we were talking about whether your daughter, who's 8 years of age, whether her daughter, it would be a good thing to bring her or not. Mm-hmm. And it brought up the very topic of conversation we're having with you right now. It's okay, a lot's going to be presented, and if any of you are not familiar with the Vagina Monologues, it does address all the issues women have been confronted with.
Most of the pieces are pretty lighthearted with a little bit of poignancy in them.
Mm-hmm.
The piece I do is not lighthearted at all. It's really, it's just brutal.
Yeah, and so there are some hard issues, and you ask yourself, well, should an 8-year-old be presented with that? Now, this was my thoughts. I feel that where adults are still going, can't address this issue, I haven't dealt with my emotional body about this, my feeling is children are just flowing with the river, and all this information that's happening around our planet is totally in their awareness. They haven't learned yet whether they should have an opinion or a judgment of it one way or the other.
Which is why the Whistleblower Kids are so profound in the way they disclose and so powerful in their strong, steady center.
Well, and in their innocence, they're able to give us the evidence.
Exactly.
I mean, they're talking about this person or that person's private. Oh, and and this one has a mole, and the other one has a tattoo, and this one has a lot of pubic hairs. I mean, they're so innocent, and see, that's my point, is that our children are so innocent, yet, and so they're not filtering the data. Whereas the information comes into an adult, and we go, ooh, it stops right there. We either push it aside in denial, or we rationalize it and justify it.
Which is why even these people who have built their moxie around disclosing really hard information are kind of going, with this stuff, like, how do I speak to this?
So, that's why I say, back up.
Yeah.
Let's just back up, because my feeling is, okay, an example that I shared earlier is that here's you have your 8-year-old child, and we know that it's not just adults that are seducing or luring them whenever they have the opportunity. It's maybe a 13-year-old that's been mind controlled, that's already being threatened, that goes and seduces the 8-year-old. And so imagine this scenario. You've got a 13-year-old, and they're really involved with the cult, and they've got a tattoo, and they've got one of the maybe skull and bones or something. And that 13-year-old goes up to the 8-year-old and goes, man, check this out. You like this? And gets them all engaged and da-da-da. And the next thing you know, he says, hey, I can put one on you. I'll do it with a magic marker, but I can put one on you. And your 8-year-old's all excited, like, wow, this 13-year-old's paying attention to me. And the next thing you know, that 8-year-old comes home and very excitedly goes, Mom, Dad, check it out, check it out. And what does the parent do? Going, oh! Right? And the child hasn't a clue why you're having that response. And now it's time for you, as an adult, to, 1, come to grips with your emotional reaction, 2, find the chutzpah, find the clarity that now needs to be communicated to your child about why this is something to be considered, discussed, and felt. All right, now this is where I want to go. Let's back up here. Your child comes home, has a significant piece of information or an experience. Your emotional body gets very scared. The child feels your fear. They don't understand why. You decide, we're just going to push this aside because it scares me so much. And there's the child going, what is going on? So what does the child learn? Maybe I shouldn't talk to my parents or guardians about this. Maybe I should hide it. Okay? But just keep backing up. That's where I want to go. And like, so for instance, let's just use that example. Your child comes home, hopefully with a erasable tattoo, but let's say a child comes home and they've got one of the cult symbols on them.
When Blue speaks of cult, she doesn't necessarily mean that a 13-year-old is maybe or maybe not involved in the cult. She's speaking to how our culture has accepted trends that are, symbols and language, that it speaks to that thing where I said, well, what are we doing that's manipulative and we don't even know? Mm-hmm. That we're adopting and becoming numb to the symbols that we're using as benign when they're not. Mm-hmm. That they actually have an archetype and an energetic behind them.
Right.
So it could be that the child, the 13-year-old's in the cult and is
manipulated,
right, and is actually grooming this other child, or it could be something so innocent. But the fact is that these symbols and words that we use have power that we've become indiscriminate towards.
Yes.
So
what I want to say to our adults, and this is where I'm suggesting role play. It's like, let's put all these symbols on the table. Let's put everything on the table that when you see it, it's indicating something that you want to address. And begin to practice saying those words, just like vagina and penis. Practice saying those words as an adult. Practice saying, to a child, why that what their interest is in is not of the best health and choice for that child or even for the world. And I can't say I've heard any kind of conversations like this because we're in fear mode right now. The adults are having reactions.
I don't know. I think there are. I'm around parents and children a lot, and
But can you talk about the Whistleblower Kids?
With some.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that word pedophilia, man, that's had such a connotation.
And you got to remember too that people who are parents of young children, that word is going to trigger them, and good.
Mm-hmm.
Good that it triggers them.
Yeah.
But we're not so desensitized that word doesn't trigger them.
Right.
But
how do we make the child? How does a parent make the child aware that there's a lot more out there we want you to be?
Yeah, so that's the big thing. If we back it up to the Vagina Monologues, my decision on whether to at least see it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it's based on the fact that, she has seen me perform since before she could speak. And, her first word was mama. And the lights came up on the stage, and I was actually, this was a different show. My back was turned, I was hanging off a scaffolding, and it was dead silent as the lights rose, and all you hear is this, Mama! So part of it is that she's seen me perform a lot, you know, and I took her to the symphony one time, and she went straight to the front of the stage at the end of the show, and I was going this way. She goes, "Where are you going, Mama? We're going backstage."
Right.
So she's got a huge education around seeing live theater.
Sure.
To the point where she thought it was just protocol to go backstage.
Yeah,
I explained to her.
right.
And the other part is that there's a couple of other people in the show that she's incredibly close to.
Yes.
She's got really rich, deep relationships with.
Yes.
So that was part of the helpful kind of indicator as to whether to take her. But, it goes back to this place of like, we let them watch these grotesque shows like Dance Moms, where the kids are dressed half naked, shaking their booty on stage, and it's the drama behind all the kids being competitive. Or we let them watch things like, Twilight, but we won't take them to the Vagina Monologues. And I had this conversation the other day where someone said, "Well, it's your decision, but I don't want to sit next to her because those questions are for you. I said, well, first of all, just don't answer them if I take her. Defer to me. I said, but the other part, she's like, there's too much hard information in this show for her to get it. And I said, well, and then you and I had this conversation, because initially Blue was saying, I'm not feeling she should go. And that's when I brought up, yeah, but we let her watch these shows, and they're so blindly manipulative, and they're shifting their paradigm and conditioning them and desensitizing them. What if I did let her see the show, you know? And these are real things.
Okay, and what I added to that, though, is that I felt, okay, if she does go towards this, I would have several conversations with her beforehand. And I would definitely create opportunity for several conversations afterwards to make sure that her understanding's there.
Absolutely, and I'm good like that with her. We talk a lot about stuff like that. But, you know, so someone said, but you're doing a piece about war crimes, and that's really intense. And I said, well, first of all, it's poetic and really visual and really metaphorical. But the other aspect is, like, if we could frame it in a way where she understands this stuff exists, but it doesn't traumatize her. I think that's in some ways really important. And that if I don't let her come see the show, that's saying to her, it's not okay for you to see something about vaginas. It's not okay for you to see something about women's empowerment. Mm-hmm. It's a really fine line, yet I don't want her to be traumatized seeing me or someone else talk about these things or act these things out. She understands theater enough to know that it's not me, because she's seen me do a lot of things. But
so really what we're coming to is that there needs to be a full-out interaction with the children about all the subjects adults are experiencing, and then very sensitively,
like I don't think it's a bad thing for her to know that there's war crimes out there that destroy women, and it, you know, for her to say, "Mommy, I know that exists," it will give her a sense of the world and empathy, and I think it will shift her away from this all about me American individualistic society stuff, where there's bigger stuff happening out there. She doesn't have to know the details, but in some ways to know that exists, and it's not just about drama mamas and their silly kids.
Okay, I want to go back to a couple of weeks ago when we started to talk about the Whistleblower Kids. You and I were having a conversation. I think I was starting to inform you about the topic.
Yeah, and we didn't realize that
Lily had overheard us, okay? And shortly after, into the conversation, Lily comes into the space, and she's got a face, and she goes, are you talking about murdering babies? And I think she even said,
social services,
and drinking their blood? You know, and she had just this full-out 8-year-of-age face on her. I took a breath and I thought, okay, here we go. And where we both participated. I thought she had her
headphones on listening to her little thing.
Yeah, right. We didn't think she was anywhere near.
A casual thing.
But regardless, what we had to do was we had to, acknowledge that this indeed happens. And, you know, the traditional parent response, at least our parents' generation, was, no, you didn't hear that. It's not true.
I think that's probably what I said.
It's not true. But my response was, okay, yes, in fact, things like that happen in the world, and the conversation we're having is we're not happy about it, and we're talking about ways that things like this can change.
And how we can help them.
And but instead of going, yeah, it's really disgusting and it's scary, and, you know, it was like, no. And we're just trying to become more informed, more knowledgeable, so that we know how to change those things, because we don't agree with it either.
Well, and it reminds me too of things like Grimm's fairy tales, and how we don't read any of those stories to our children anymore. I mean, look at Hansel and Gretel. You know, it was like the world's way of putting it out there that the world isn't always going to be wonderful, and that there's things bigger than you out there that are happening, and then how would you help them? Or, you know, like in Hansel and Gretel, they learn a tool to keep themselves safe, dropping the breadcrumbs, and yet there's this wicked witch who takes them in and wants to eat them, and they find a way to escape. And these are the stories we used to read to our children, and there wasn't a whole lot of discourse around whether we should or shouldn't. Those were just the fairy tales we read to our children.
Yeah, everyone laughed about the dark witch and being thrown in the oven.
Yeah, but in some ways it was like, and you know, if you read the Grimm's version, they're grim. I mean, they're out there, but we read them to our children, and I think they were actually kind of a great tool for balancing out this thing in some ways, where we're giving them a little bit of this idea of, here's some tools, keep yourself safe, this is, this.
Well, we're
We
also
haven't-
telling them,
we're-
here's the bad story, and this is the good ending. But that's
Right.
that duality that's been
Yeah.
created to keep us in the loop too.
Well, but we don't even do the duality anymore. We just go to like huge drama with these shows that are completely ridiculous, or we don't talk at all about it. And so
Right.
there's no middle ground for the stuff that, really does sort of happen, and to make kids aware in a way.
Yeah, where's the breadcrumbs?
Yeah, give
Right?
them their breadcrumbs, give them their tools. And,
Yeah.
and Hansel and Gretel, they fight back, they kill her, they escape.
But they kill her. I mean, it's still the messages.
Well, but my
are,
point is like we
I
don't
know
even
what you're
touch
saying.
that stuff anymore.
Yes, yes. Well, here's a thought that's coming to me. I just realized that when I work with individuals in mentoring, and I'm with an adult that is similar to a child in that you bring up a topic like pedophilia and they're like, oh, no, I don't want to talk about that. And I realized that my response to them is not very unlike my response to the 8 years of age. Basically, what I'm trying to get to when I see someone back off in fear is let's go to the fear. Let's go to your emotional reaction. I'm not going to offer you an opinion or a position on whether that's good or bad. But how do you come back to your self-empowerment? And part of that is you talk about the things that are hard for you.
Well, it's the discovery, a place of discovery.
Mm-hmm.
You've been discerning, you figured out what it is, and then you speak to it through discovery.
Mm-hmm. So I realize, there's a lot of us out there that are having to deal with family and friends, and we're talking in kind of a very young age category, in just saying, okay, I understand you're afraid, darling, let's understand that more deeply, and how can you help yourself to feel safe, and how knowledge does empower. And yes, it is wise to be discerning, like know the things that don't feel right to you, and know the things that don't feel right for the people as a whole. And I guess in a way we're going back to, the understanding of right action. And I know maybe we don't want to use this word anymore, but we're really returning to an understanding of morality, not associated with religion, but a sense of just knowing what's right. And I think it comes down to some real basic agreements of no harm, no interference, and communication. Giving everyone the opportunity to express themselves without...
So when you say no harm, no interference, what do you mean by the interference part? I think I get it, but I want...
Well, interference can be when you impose your belief upon another. That's interference.
Okay.
Interference is even when you're telling your child that pedophilia, you just put it in a box. It's bad, it's dark, it's ugly. That's an opinionated response, because we don't want to put it in such a negative or a positive. What we want to do is we want to teach the child, this is something that's happening on the planet. And the group that you are a part of, your family, your community, we are all looking at this situation, and we would choose a different way, because we want to also get into that place of neutrality. Now we're going down the path of spirituality. Mm-hmm. We want to get in that place of neutrality, self-empowerment. Therefore, we can now assess the world without reacting to it, so that we can really make decisions. You've got to be able to you have to be able to talk about pedophilia from a neutral place, so that you can come up with a dynamic and creative solution for how you're going to approach it. It doesn't assist us to be angry at it and want to attack it, because that's an old reality that is not going to heal us, number one.
How many people do you know that are actually getting angry and attacking it? I'm seeing most people frozen in fear, not being able to get even to the discernment, to the discovery.
Well, I've seen people expressing anger. Mostly I'm speaking to the social network. people going,
I
this
see
is
what you're saying.
disgusting.
Yeah,
This is
okay.
disgusting. We should kill all these people, and oh my gosh, and we
Right,
should.
that doesn't really give us a solution, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah, I see what
In
you're saying.
fact, that's the loop. But if we go, okay, look, I don't choose this in my life. I don't think it makes for a safe environment. I want an environment that I feel free to express myself, and I want an environment that I feel my children are safe. Okay, and then work from there. And I think part of the creative solution is, okay, then let's start with preventative. We can have control over that.
Right.
Okay, I had mentioned this in a prior show, and I want to bring it up again. I think I had shared, Lily one day came home, and she was sharing that they had created a spy group in her classroom. There's a small group, okay, but I love this. And I said, oh, okay, and I was really curious. I was like, well, what are you spying on? And she said, we're spying on everyone, the kids and teachers. And I said, well, then what do you do? And she said, well, we're writing notes. We're keeping a journal of everything. And I said, so of what purpose is that? Well, then we know exactly what's going on. We know everything that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, interesting. And then there was one other bit I'm going to share, and then I want to explain why I brought it up. And so the other part was, they said, yeah, but there's this one boy, and he keeps trying to steal our journal. And I said, so what are you doing about that? And she gets a big grin on her face. She says, well, me and so, we got another journal that looks exactly like it, and we wrote basically misinformation in the journal, and we put it in the place of where the original one was, so that when he comes to steal it, that he's going to get the wrong information. Okay, so number one, collective consciousness, they're so tuned in. All right, they're doing their own little espionage spying. But then it occurred to me, hey, now, what if we took this creative model that they have already brought forth, and we started to implement in it? Well, here's some things that you can keep aware of and keep notes of, and bring it home to us. Bring it home to your mommy and daddy and your guardians, and let us work with you on how you can improve your spying. Now, we don't have to indicate spying in the negative sense. But
Right.
if they're bringing a game like that home, here's our little troop. Here's our spiritual warriors. We can start to say, well, when you're in the school ground, how many adults are taking a walk outside the playground when you're out there for 15, 20 minutes? And they come home and go, well, there's 3. And do you see him every day? Things like that. Do you see him every day? Yeah. Do you know him? Oh, yeah, we know him. Well, how do you know him? Well, that's my mom's friend. I always see her go out and have coffee with her. Great. How do you know the other person? Oh, they always call us over and they give us a piece of candy. And it's like, you don't have to react. You're just getting the information, getting the intel through your children. I think we may have a very creative solution in educating our children to have eyes wide open. My gosh, we could even integrate, I don't know about the school system, but we could even integrate a point system for how much intel anyone comes in with. But you understand my point.
I don't understand.
You don't understand
no,
it.
You're totally losing me, and I don't know if it's that I don't want to hear it or if it's not making sense.
Okay, well,
So where are we going with this whole playground thing?
my point is that we may have an opening here for creative solutions and begin to educate our children to be the watchers in our society and environments. They're paying attention anyway. They've already indicated they're willing to record what they're paying attention to.
Well, we know Lily and her friends are.
Okay?
Yeah.
And we as adults could probably discern or connect dots if it doesn't look like it's lining up in a healthy way. So I'm basically saying, let them be the observers. In fact, encourage them to be the observer without us instilling fear and saying, oh, look, we're looking for dark matter. We're looking to encourage them to become more aware of their environment, patterns, loops, unusual happenings, usual happenings, and that might open up the arena of communication with them.
But I think I mean, I think parents are already doing that to a really great degree. I think that I mean, I don't know about you, but I know that when Lily goes to a new house for a sleepover, I always get nervous if there's males in the house, because we've heard stories for lifetimes where 10 years later a daughter discloses to their parents that, oh yeah, when I was this old and you let me stay at so-and-so's house, you know, I think is, you know, and when I was younger, I know when we moved to Arkansas, I was the only black-haired girl in the school. Everyone else was light brown or tow-headed, really southern. And my mom disclosed to me later when I was older, she said I was really nervous when we moved here because no one in our small school looked like you. And I used to get really scared when you would go to sleepovers. Because, you know, no one can really tell what I am anyway. And one kid, you know, teased me about being Middle Eastern. And I was like, well, I didn't even know what Middle Eastern was, you know. And so, you know, there's this dark girl coming in from the city. And so my mom, even at that era, was having thoughts as a woman with a daughter child, staying at sleepovers and going, gee, I wonder. You know, there's this, I think it's already existing. And then we do ask questions like, you know, Lily had a new sleepover recently too, and there's nothing about this family that would ever indicate anything would happen, but
Sure.
you know, she came home and I was like, so how late did you stay up? And all of my questions, there was some back little, you know, I'm still listening for those things, and I wasn't ever sexually abused as a child, so I don't, you know, that's not my story of being hyper aware. It's just, I think it's just who we are, as especially women with daughters, you know, or women in general with any sort of child. And I'm not sure if men are as astute in that way because women have lived this more, but, you know, and I'll say, so how was the sleepover? How late did you stay up? You know, where did you sleep? Did you get up in the middle of the night at all? Did anything wake you up, or did you sleep okay? So I ask these questions that sound really benign, but I am cataloging. So I think there's, and it would be great to get feedback from you, because I think there's so many parents already doing this. I mean, the crux comes when you get information that you don't know how to discern, and then we typically get so scared we push it away, you know.
Okay,
So-
but I think one of the things we've been called to, like the many listeners who are pioneering the path, is that if we're already doing it, right, it's beginning to share that information with others, because obviously there are still children that aren't in that awareness with their guardian or parent, and they are the ones that are being harvested. So I don't know if I'd make that assumption, Becca. I mean, I think that...
But I'm around a lot of parents, and we talk. And
well,
I think,
and we're also in a small community. I think that
well,
helps.
not just even here. I mean, I've got friends all over the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's, even if we're not speaking to it directly, I've had enough of those conversations to know enough of us are doing it. But I also feel like, I mean, and here's the crux. Like, I would like to think that if something happened, even just on a very subtle level with my daughter, where she was uncomfortable out of my hand, you know, when she was not in my presence, that I would sense it. I mean, I'd like to think that. I don't know if I would.
Right.
But I'm really, really in touch with every little subtle thing that happens in me. And if I feel uncomfortable, I know that there's a projection happening, a transference happening from her, and I can figure that out. Most people aren't quite that aware. You know, and maybe I wouldn't. That's the other thing, is maybe I wouldn't know. I'd like to think I would, but maybe I wouldn't.
Well, I think all in all, the point of this conversation is that we can continue to raise our awareness with our children, but more importantly, address an awareness in the vocabulary that
right,
we're
which
using.
just brings us back full circle to
Right.
what, you know, what are we using that isn't benign that we think is, and what can we use to encourage children to be aware in a way that's not traumatic and empower them. And yeah. So what kind of language do you think we're using that is
Well, I
sublimating?
think one of the things we could do is, if we've identified symbols, even the symbols on our money, okay, all right, I think we should start, you know, talking to our children about these symbols that, you know, we know they're all over the place, but we don't feel that they're in the hands of people that are making good choices for all of us. I think just starting to show the money, right? So our children know money's falling out. I mean, they have some sense. They, you know, maybe they don't understand it as well as we do. But yeah, Show them the dollar bills, show them the pyramid, show them the eye at the top. Explain to them that these symbols are not necessarily representing what we would consider creative and free, okay? Pull out the pentacle. Show how there was a time that the pentacle may have represented... the pentagram. How a symbol may have represented something heartful, but it no longer. Even the swastika. I mean, in the past, in our parents' generation, my gosh, the swastika was like evil. And now it's becoming like pop. You know, it's cool. And that's part of the teenage cult, you know. They're messing around with the swastika, but they're adopting the negative aspect of it. It's that trendy thing again, right? But I think go grab up all the symbols. And the, you know, like the, what do they call the sculptures on the building, the argyles? Is that it? Gargoyles. Gargoyles. I love how I reverse things.
I know, I do too.
Gargoyles.
Here, right?
You know, they're scary looking. You know.
Okay, so I'm just going to play devil's advocate for a minute on this.
Yeah.
Because are we feeding and propagating that symbolism and what it stands for archetypically by bringing it to their awareness? Are we, you know, because there is such an innocence and a freedom where they don't have that schema in place yet that this thing means that thing. So instead of bringing them into a place where we're explaining to them why this pyramid with the eye is good and not good, they're going to get curious and go, why is it not good, and blah, blah, blah. And it's going to imbue that energy, as opposed to just giving them beauty and light symbolically and just not even giving it that energy.
Okay, I think you're naming the crux of the issue that we're having amongst our adults. Do we educate each other so that we're more aware, that we can discern, all right? Or, you know, it's kind of like that polarity again. Or are we just going to focus on the love and the beauty, all right? And that's what the wake-up call is about. It's like love and beauty is from within. It's not...
That's my point, yeah.
And it externalizes. So again, I think it's an education. I think what I'm saying is, no matter how long this matrix reality of corruption is going to continue, our children need to be informed. Wake them up now, even if our adults aren't woken up. But I think I am saying everything we're learning as adults, how do we begin to share this awareness with the children so that they don't feel like they're always put aside. You don't need to know about this. You know, oh, we're going to have a better world for you when you grow up. No. I think that 13-year-old is really ready. I mean, you see it in the news, too. You've seen it on the social network. Children of 13 years of age are starting to speak out, and they're starting to ask, why are chemicals being put on our food? What's going on with GMO? They're asking.
Well, I mean, Lily's asking that, but then I'm
exactly.
Mom, so.
And I think we need to begin to share the greater picture. So I guess that's where it's starting to open for me.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I sometimes feel like, well, you know, when she was 5, she woke me up at 6 in the morning. Mommy, get up, I have a question. Get up, I have a question. And I opened my eyes and she goes, what's all this heaven and hell stuff and God? And I was like, are you serious? Like, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. And I remember saying to her, well, there is no such thing as heaven or hell. It's what you choose to live in. Your heaven and hell are the choices you make. And she totally got it. She's like, so there's no devil and there's no hell? And I said, well, basically you can choose to live in light and beauty, or you can choose to live in darkness. It's your choice. And I said, and you know, we've talked about how creating your own power and love and light overcomes everything, and that you have a choice. She said, so I have a choice to do whatever I want in this world and make it come true? And I said, absolutely. She said, I have a choice to like be like living in a place like hell, or I have a choice to be living in a place like heaven. And I said, yes. So no one else makes this choice for me. It's all about me. And I said, yes, you have the power to live in light and love. It's your choice. And that was a profound shift for her in terms of like, so I can manifest everything I want. I was like, yes, you can, by making that choice. And there's no such thing. No one's going to throw you into hell. And so for me, it was kind of like, I didn't have to teach her about, I didn't have to engage her in a conversation with that language to teach her about the negative symbolism of stuff. I brought her beyond that to a place of her essential power. That, you know, and that's, I think, the true, to me, the crux of it is, you know, we've talked about this a couple of different times around our educational system, like teaching children that they have autonomy and that they have power and that they can change things and that their voices can be heard. Mm-hmm. Not denying that the bad things happen, but not spending time educating them about what it means, what the meaning is behind it and why. It's like, take them beyond that and go, you are ultimately powerful and bright and you can change the world just by living in light and love. And that's really where the crux is for me.
Okay, I think that's a really good point. That, you know, we're nurturing and cultivating a more creative stance for the children. And I could see that, I can see that as well. And perhaps it is amongst us as adults who are addressing those issues a little more that, you know, I guess we're just trying, you know, in a way our intention is to create the environment that allows that consciousness that's being nurtured in the child.
Because I think part of our fear around discussing those things, or not our fear, our confusion, how to do it, all of that stuff is because we have been so conditioned that stuff still has power over us. Mm-hmm. So model by freeing yourself from it without even giving it attention. So that's, I think, why I was having such a reaction and getting kind of a little irritated and frustrated and antsy when you were talking about the whole thing about like, well, you know, be a spy and look at the stuff on the playground and is this person doing this and is that person doing, and there's something about like just keeping track of your kids that's just fundamental in that statement. But I was like, I don't even want to go there.
Yeah, I got you.
I don't even want to give that power in a way. I mean, if we're playing spy because, you know, we are trying to disclose things that are bad, and that's great, you know, but doing it purposefully I just think we're feeding that same energy as opposed to knocking that stuff out, not even giving it any energy, teaching them about those things, feeding that energy because they're going to get curious. Well, why is the pyramid with the eye so evil? And what? Oh, it's related to government. It's like, I don't even want to talk about government. I don't want to talk about that. I want to teach her or these children that you have autonomy. You have so much power. And educating her by knowing that there's war crimes happening and knowing that there's corruption is good because it gets them out of their egocentric, Americanized me self. And then, you know, I'm having a drama fit about the jelly on my sandwich not being the right kind. It's like, dude, just eat it. There's people starving in it, you know. So I think it's important to get them out of their little small self. But I don't want to feed it by educating her about that stuff. I want to educate her from a place of, so when she comes across that symbolism that has that negative energy and power, she just blows it out of the water and just fragments it. It doesn't even take it on. She's like, that thing? Psh. I can feel intuitively that that's just manipulative, you know, because she's so in her strong, solid core of empowerment and autonomy and not living in hell or symbolism of the devil and that paradigm or even God, that it's all in her.
Well, so, I think you're probably speaking from a place that most people resonate with. Absolutely.
Yeah, and thank God I have a daughter that pushes me. She asks the right questions. My daughter asks the right questions of me, you know.
And I think what I'm probing is addressing how molecularly the messages are so layered all around us, and you know, for the few hours we get to spend with the children, and then we put them back into the little prison schools. I just, you know, I'm kind of weighing out that, you know, continual subliminal messages, and it's like, I mean, I love what you're saying, and I can certainly empathize. And I guess this would be an area I'd love to hear from the listeners. You know, because it's obvious that we have two very different approaches to it. I
Well,
think our
there's some
heart is
commonality.
there.
Yeah, I think there's always some commonality in the sense that, like, I want her to be aware of some of these things. It's how we go about doing it. I think that.
Yeah, I agree. And but I would certainly head up a little creative spy group for educational model that we could send international.
Well, and really what you're talking about with the spy group is getting kids to be discerning about, and but let's not forget that piece about keeping them in their core and their power, building their discernment and intuition to a degree where they're so living in light and love and empowerment that if that thing doesn't resonate with them, they refute it. They just let it go. They don't give it any power at all. And that's really how we shift this thing.
Yes, and I think we're doing that simultaneously. I mean, that's no different from the healing process we're doing with ourselves. We're recognizing, discerning, and going, whew, that doesn't, I don't align with that at all, while we're healing and encouraging a deeper self-empowerment.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is the same thing. I mean, hopefully that model in the adults, as we grow in our consciousness and strength, that it is permeating the consciousness of our youth.
Yeah, and so this youth that we're catching at a really young age in this way, think about what they're going to be like as adults. I mean, we're working it out now, but if we're working it out with them at a young age, these next generations are going to have a profound shift on our universe.
Absolutely. And just so to clarify, again, I still support expanding the vocabulary, if nothing else.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten there yet, but yeah, it's expanding that vocabulary. Absolutely.
And maybe even, do a little role-playing adult to adult of your child comes home and you need to address one of these issues. Or even if we hold it in our consciousness, like if we hold the sex crimes that are happening and we hold them in an adult frame of consciousness, that it is something to be watchful of, that alone is going to be sensed and felt by our youth.
Yeah.
But still, if ever that moment comes up and your child has to speak to...
But we know what to watch for, which is that discernment piece. We have to be brave enough to start being more discerning of the things that are happening out there.
That's right.
And really look at them so that we can hold a really strong container of protection around our children.
So with the closure of this show, I'd like us to take a deep breath.
I just want to speak first to that. Did you notice how I noticed how much we were squirming, and you kept shaking your leg? She has never in a single broadcast shook her leg the entire broadcast. And we were both like this almost the whole time.
Yeah, I noticed that.
And then I would sit back.
I got something important to say.
It was, so even though we feel like, we got this one, we are experiencing, I can just tell by our movement.
I can feel the raw energy. It's just like my whole being is just rocking. And I guess where I was going is that, with the deep breath and just letting everything move through, is I like to hold a most blessed environment of energies that are connected to our hearts and that is supportive of our growth and consciousness, and that we all find peace and calm and effortlessness in creating the beautiful reality of this planet that we hold in our hearts, that we are here for each other, we are connected, no one is alone, and we are doing the absolute best that we can. So,
love one another because we are one love. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again soon.